Hi, everyone. This is Tori Vandalin with Prevent Connect. The podcast you're about to listen to is an excerpt from a recording of a web conference we did in May 2021, Preventing Sexual Violence During COVID-19 in Latinx Communities. This web conference was part of our Sexual Violence Prevention During the COVID-19 Pandemic, Adapting in an Ever-Changing Landscape series in partnership with the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. This podcast is made available both in English and in Spanish, thanks to our interpreters during the web conference and with assistance from Imelda Talamantes, Latinx Services Coordinator with Valor US and Prevent Connect.
Sí, también les quiero presentar.
Ready for our next slide. I would also like to present to you one of our speakers today, who is Pastor Benjamin. Pastor Ortega is one of the main pastors of the ministries Fuente de Vida in Glendale, California. Over the past 15 years, he has implemented counseling and family advisories programs in his ministry, fighting for respect and for the dignity of everyone, and also empowering new generations against violence and against any type of abuse, physical or verbal. He works with a network of more than 50 religious leaders who develop programs on family health, family development throughout the state and the nation.
En divinidades con énfasis en cuidado pastoral y familiar de
in
Fuller
family development in former theological seminary. Currently, he is a PhD candidate in applied theology and family ministry.
Thank you for offering me this opportunity. I feel extremely privileged as a Latino when I see these women that had fought so hard to represent our community, especially at such a high level, at such an important level. And when I hear the struggle to overcome the pain and to help those who are also suffering. It's always been an honor to work with the Latino community, and that has been one of the founding reasons for our ministries of Fountain of Life, Fuente de Vida. We work in LA, in Southern California, and also through a network nationwide in order to prevent violence, to support families, and especially in order to end this terrible evil that is violence. Through our faith-based community, we are reaching out to everyone, regardless of their own religion, in order to unite all communities and in order to overcome the suffering that these situations can cause. As a Christian community, we believe that domestic violence does not reside in any one faith, in any one nationality or skin color. Both domestic violence, sexual violence, and verbal and emotional abuse, they're everywhere. And so this is something that needs to be stopped. And that is what we work on within our own Latin community with Fuente de Vida. Over time, we've realized that there's a huge disconnect oftentimes between Latino communities because of their religious beliefs and the resources that they're being offered. So we need to help those who are going through difficult times, those who are suffering. But we've realized that people who are suffering these situations of harassment, of violence, they don't always look for help within their own faith-based communities. They're hesitant to turn to their faith-based communities to ask for help. And so for years now, what we've been working on is to identify how to break that distancing, how to reconnect, and how to understand that it doesn't matter what your religious beliefs are when you live in such a divided nation, such a divided world as well. We do realize that there's a common problem in all communities, which is the problem of violence. All of us within our families, whatever the generation is, we have seen these terrible situations. And we also realize that there's a huge number of people who live in situations of violence. And we see there's a need as well in our religious communities to prevent violence and to fight against the violence that already exists. So I have a presentation for you. I hope I'm able to share the screen.
Nuestra pantalla. Ok, entonces la idea es que hay una
So
urgente.
now I'm sharing my PowerPoint. The main idea here is that there's an urgent need to include faith-based communities in our fight against violence. Through our statistics, through talking to people, we've seen that there are two main areas where people don't always look for help. They don't always turn to help to their church or to their religious organization. A lot of people have told us, I don't go to church to ask for help in my situation of domestic violence. I go to church just to express my religious faith. And they don't realize that their church can offer them specific solutions in terms of any violence they may be suffering from in their family or in their community. So one of the issues that we see needs our help as a faith-based organization is new generations, because sometimes violence is transmitted from generation to generation as the children reenact what they've seen growing up. If we have a family with violence in it, the children will absorb that violence and repeat it in future generations. It's almost something that can't be stopped generationally. But however, if we are an entity that is respected in that community and is part of that family life, then we can extend our help to that family. And we see organizations like Ya Basta and other entities that are working with that are reaching all communities. And that way we'll see positive results for future generations. So that's something that we've also been struck by. Another thing that we're seeing is that there's an increase in violence in our societies. We see the indices of violence in different communities, including Hispanic communities, and it's reached alarming proportions. And also it reaches all social strata, all communities. So the question is, how can faith-based organizations respond to this increase? There's a huge need for us to respond. Why? Because within our churches, our parishes, within all of our faith-based centers, we have families who turn to us. We have families present. In all Christian organizations, in all families, there always will be a situation of abuse present at some point. So we realize that we have to be able to find that common space and to be able to work to help these victims.
but that are working with the communities. And even if though we may hold different beliefs, we can unite in intentional manner for to work with those who believe. And so there is an intentional action to hold hands and work and walk together as a community of faith, which again, it goes back to the same thing, to know the victim and to come to the victim where they are. And sometimes when they're in pain, we need to show them the resources because they won't come to us. We need to go there. And what we know is that as long as we can prevent, prevention itself is pretty powerful. If we can prevent the abuse, the harassment, it would be wonderful. But if not, we can then work with the victim, and we're working in both directions, in both actions. But again, prevention is one of the standards that we most want to develop. And what is it that we learned during the COVID 2020 about all of this. So ourselves, within the many challenges that came up, there were three that we were able to identify. And we, first of all, we had to, again, identify those who suffer and, again, work with them at their level. This meant that we had to depart from what we were used to doing. Again, being confined ended up separating us even more. So our action was to come even more intentionally to those who were being abused. Again, faith-based communities can be essential and can be instrumental in this type of help. We had to reimagine the way we serve people. Before the pandemic, we served people when they came to our centers. People had to come to us, and then we could conversate, but that isn't available anymore. So the question we asked ourselves was, how do we do it now? We know that digital platforms like Zoom and others were the bridge that helped us uh, to make these connections. But the issue was, how do we find the help so for us to achieve that bridge? And again, how do we get there? And that is where we found the help at Valor US. Valor US was the institution that immediately identified our work and saw it as their own work, and in helping those who are suffering from abuse. And with their help, we were able to develop some projects, teaching projects, prevention projects, and projects where we worked constantly with the families in an intentional manner in avoiding or preventing any kind of abuse, and maybe even identifying certain symptoms that could signal a abuse about to happen. And currently, we are able to communicate with any person, so not only statewide but also nationwide. And after that conference, what happened, it was that families, local families, started giving their Zoom connections or links to their people in other countries. And so we were able to speak internationally to people who were participating in our conferences, in our prevention conferences. This, again, gave us such a wonderful joy at being able to reach these people internationally. And again, this was only possible through the help and the support of our allies who supported us in this work. That led us to another great success, which was the beginning of a international and national network for support and help to the victims. And now we are currently working in different countries and in almost every single state with different people and entities who are willing and wishing to identify any persons within the faith-based communities who are at risk of suffering this sexual harassment and abuse. So how are we now working? Well, we're working in two directions. There is a development and training plan to be able to identify, as I said at the beginning, identify that mentality where people might believe that if I'm not a part of this faith, if I don't hold the same beliefs as this community, I'm not capable or maybe able to receive that work. But we want to make sure that people know that they can work and that we are willing to work with our communities independently of the faith that we hold, because people need it, and these people don't have anywhere else to go in many of the cases. The other direction is to empower the community. At that time that we train the leaders, the community leaders, or we let them know in which way they can help. As a matter of fact, there is a pilot program that we are beginning now. We have a person with three computers, where any persons in a faith-based community who works in this type of case may not have the appropriate personnel or the ideal person to work through this problem. these computers allow them to connect the victim or give them the access to a Zoom interview where we can give them directions and give them instructions through Zoom. And that was the result of the different um, solutions that we came up with during the COVID pandemic. And my question to those who are in some sort of faith-based community is for you to be vocal and ask your leaders that, ask them to unite with us in this type of work. I think that it is great when you can approach your religious leader to support those who suffer and ask him, her to unite with these other entities in doing this work, which can be and have a great impact in favor of people who suffer, because it is our mandate from Jesus Christ to work with those who suffer. And that is the work that we have been doing, and we will continue working, and we're here at your service, Claudia or
Sí, muchas gracias,
Imelda.
pastor. Realmente
Yes, Pastor, thank you so much. It really is
increíble el trabajo, los
an
esfuerzos
incredible
que
labor,
hacen
an incredible efforts, and incredible
con su
impact
verdad,
that you have had in your community,
que
in the
conocen
persons,
a
on
los
the persons that,
necesitados.
as you
A
very
veces
well
pienso que
mention them as people
el
who suffer.
único lugar donde
And
podemos
again, the only
verdaderamente
place that they have available
identificar, ¿verdad?
these churches,
Y
these
estamos
religions,
viendo que
or these faith-based
las
communities,
personas que están
and
sufriendo
for them to learn that there is help for people who suffer violence
independientemente de todas
in
formas,
any form. There are
vamos
different
a
forms of violence. There is sexual violence, and there is physical violence. And again, violence comes in many different forms and shapes. And it's great that you can offer this support in your ministry.
Thanks for listening. Follow along with other Prevent Connect podcasts at preventconnect.org/podcast.